There's a ute on a dealer's lot about 40 minutes from me. White 2013 V8, tray with a hard lid, 120 odd thousand kilometers on it. The sticker says $38,880, 13 years old, and the asking price is within arm's reach of what the thing cost brand new with plastic still on the seats. Walk two doors down and you can order a new dual cab. The cheapest Ranger in the 2026 range starts around 37,000 before you've paid a cent of on-road costs, and the range runs all the way to just under 100 grand. A basic single cab LandCruiser 79, the one with cardboard door trims and a vinyl floor, is about 73,500 before on-roads. That's the entry ticket. That's the plain one. So here's the thing that shouldn't be true. Somewhere in this country, there are hundreds of thousands of old utes. Falcons, Commodores, HiLuxes, 79s, Tritons, Navaras, sitting in driveways under a tarp or on a work site with a tray full of offcuts, and their owners genuinely believe they're driving something worth 8 or 10 grand. A lot of them are wrong by a factor of 2 or 3. Some of them are wrong by a factor of 10, and they'd fall over if they knew. I've had a lot of these things in bits. Barras on the stand, LS heads on the bench, a couple of 1VD V8s I'd rather not talk about, and what's happened to the price of old utes over the last few years isn't nostalgia, isn't hype, and it isn't people paying silly money because a magazine told them to. It's arithmetic. Cold, boring, unarguable arithmetic, and once you see the sum, you'll never look at the thing in your driveway the same way. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which utes are climbing and which ones aren't, why the market did this, what to do this week to protect the value of yours, and the single number on every new ute brochure that's technically true and functionally a lie. That last one is going to annoy you. It should. Let's start with the thing. Almost everybody gets backwards. Ask around, and you'll be told old utes are going up because blokes miss them. Sentiment. Middle-aged men buying back their youth. There's a bit of that, sure, but sentiment is the paint on top. It's not the structure underneath, and if sentiment were doing the work, every old ute would be climbing at the same rate, and they're absolutely not. What's actually driving this is replacement cost. The value of any working machine is anchored to what it cost you to buy something that does the same job. Not something similar, something that does the same job to the same standard with the same running costs. Every time the replacement gets more expensive, or gets worse at the job, or comes with a bill the old one never had, the old one gets more valuable. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. Economists have fancy names for this. Forget the names. Think of it like the last good hardware store in town. When it's the only one left that still sells single fasteners out of a bin instead of a plastic packet of 20, the price of what's in that bin goes one direction, and it isn't down. Now apply that to utes. Over the last decade, 3 things happened at once, and they all push the same way. The supply of the old ones stopped forever and started shrinking. The replacement got dramatically more expensive, and this is the part people miss. The replacement got worse at some specific things the old one did without complaining, while getting better at things you may not have asked for. That's the sum. Frozen supply, rising replacement cost, and a capability gap that money can't close, because nobody sells the old capability anymore at any price. The old mechanics understood this instinctively about tooling, long before it happened to vehicles. Ask anyone who's been in a workshop 40 years which press they'd fight you for, and it's never the newest one. It's the heavy old thing that still holds tolerance, because they know exactly what it costs to replace, and exactly how much worse the replacement is. So let's walk the 3 parts in order, starting with supply, because supply is the one that can never be undone. The Falcon ute finished on a Friday afternoon, the 29th of July 2016, at Broadmeadows in Melbourne. The last one down the line was a white XR6 manual, and Ford kept it. 55 years of continuous production from the XK in 1961, and roughly 467,000 of them all up. That sounds like an ocean of utes until you notice how the production splits. The final FG and FGX generation, the 8 years right before the end, accounted for only about 52,000. Holden hung on 15 months longer. Elizabeth in Adelaide closed on the 20th of October 2017, and the VF ute went with it, including a run-out V8 model with the 6.2-litre LS3 out of the Corvette parts bin. Here's what matters about those dates. That number can only go down now. Everyone that gets rolled into a tree, Everyone that rusts through the tray floor and gets weighed in, everyone that gets stripped for a drift car, gone permanently from a pool that will never be topped up. A car-based ute isn't a thing you can restore out of thin air. There's no aftermarket pressing new ute cab shells, and nobody is coming to replace them. The Australian coupe utility, a passenger car from the windscreen forward, a tray from the windscreen back, on the same platform, with the same ride, is not built by anyone on Earth anymore in that form. The closest things going are unibody crossovers with a bed on the back, which are useful vehicles and not the same animal. Ford's chief executive has said out loud that a Falcon-style ute revival is being looked at seriously. I'll believe it when I can put a deposit on one. Executives say a lot of things in interviews. Now, the second part, and this is where it stops being about badges and starts being about hardware. A big chunk of what your old ute is worth has nothing to do with the ute. It's what's bolted between the front wheels. Ford built the Barra 6 at Geelong from 2002 until 2016. 4 litres, twin cams, cast iron block. Closed deck, deep skirt. The kind of bottom end that was designed to do 1,000,000 kilometres in a taxi and then get sold to a bloke who wants 600 horsepower. It started at 182 kilowatts in the base naturally aspirated version and finished at 195 in the last of them. The turbo versions began at 240 kilowatts and finished at 325 in the final sprint, which had a boost scramble function that shoved it to 370 for about 10 seconds at a time. That engine is now a globally traded commodity. There are people in the United States hunting Australian sixes to put into things Ford never imagined, because the block takes boost that would need a checkbook and a machine shop in other engine families. 10 years ago, you could pick up a rebuildable long motor for a few $100s. Try that now. Same story on the other side of the aisle. The Gen 3 and LSV8s in Commodore utes are the most swap-friendly, best-supported pushrod engines ever made. Parts, cams, heads, brackets, headers, everything exists, off the shelf, tomorrow. So when you price an old ute, you're not pricing a used vehicle. You're pricing a drivetrain that people want on its own, in a body that can't be replaced, and the two numbers add rather than average. That's why a tired one with a sound engine is worth more than the state of the paint suggests. And it's why thieves know exactly which utes to look at in a car park. Third part. The one where a decision made in a policy office turns your ute into an appreciating asset. The 70 Series LandCruiser has been in production since 1984 and has worn something like 24 different engines. The 4.5-litre turbo diesel V8 is gone from Australian production, pushed out by tightening fuel efficiency and emissions rules. And the current 79 single cab runs the 2.8-litre 4 out of the HiLuxes instead. On paper, the 4 is fine. It makes 150 kilowatts and 500 newton meters against the V8's 151 and 430. More torque, better economy, a proper automatic option. The market's reaction has been merciless. Retailers who specialize in these things reckon a used V8 now carries a premium of somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 over an equivalent new 4-cylinder, and I'd treat that as a range rather than gospel because it moves with condition and spec. What isn't in doubt is the direction. When Toyota confirmed the V8 was ending, there were more than 100 near-new 70 series listed at once, plenty of them at least $50,000 above their new list price, with a handful of delivery kilometre examples wearing asks up around 135 to 155,000. Two honest caveats there. Those are asking prices, not sale prices, and there's a canyon between the two. I trust auction results far more than I trust a Gumtree ad, and I'll come back to that. And I'll say plainly that I've spent far more of my life under Falcons and Commodores than under 70 series. So on the 79, I'm reading the market and talking to people who live in them rather than speaking from my own tally of rebuilds. Behind all of it is the emissions standard that started in 2025. It doesn't ban anything. It sets an average carbon dioxide ceiling across everything a brand brings into the country. 141 grams per kilometre for cars and SUVs in that first year. 210 for utes, vans and big off-roaders, and fines them $100 per gram per vehicle when they're over. Those ceilings drop about 17% for 2026, and by 2029 they're roughly 59% below where they started. One major brand had racked up around $25 million of liability in the first 6 months alone. The consequence for you isn't a tax at the dealership. It's simpler and worse. Nobody is ever going to build a simple, big capacity, filter free diesel ute again. Not because they can't, because the maths of their fleet average forbids it, which means the ones already built are the last ones that will ever exist. Quick one before we get into the running costs side, which is the part that actually decides what these things are worth. If you're finding this useful, subscribe. It's the only thing that decides whether videos like this keep getting made. Because next I want to show you the specific repair bill your old ute is structurally incapable of ever handing you. And it's a 5-figure conversation more often than anyone at a sales desk will admit. Right. Emissions hardware. A modern diesel has a filter in the exhaust that catches soot. To empty itself, it has to get hot enough to burn that soot off. The engine dumps extra fuel to raise exhaust temperature, and the filter cleans itself out on the run. That's regeneration, and it works beautifully when the vehicle is doing what the engineers assumed it would do. Long, steady, hot runs. Here's the problem. A ute's real life is 11 minutes to the site, idle 4 minutes to the supply place, idle, home. The filter starts a burn cycle, never finishes it, and starts loading up with unburnt soot on top of what's already there. Do that for a couple of years and you get white smoke, warning lights, limp mode, and a vehicle that has decided for you that today is not a work day. There's a second, sneakier layer to it. Regeneration burns soot, but it cannot remove ash, and ash accumulates permanently. So even a filter that's been treated perfectly, always run hot, always allowed to finish its cycles, still slowly fills with a fine mineral residue that only comes out on a cleaning machine or not at all. What does that cost you? Cleaning is the cheap path. Replacement is not. Quotes generally land somewhere between $1,500 and $5,000 depending on the vehicle. And the specialists will tell you plenty of jobs that arrive as filter problems are actually a failed pressure sensor or an exhaust temperature sensor upstream. Then there's the urea system on the newer ones, the tank of fluid that gets injected into the exhaust to deal with oxides of nitrogen. Sensors, a pump, an injector, a module, all living in the hottest, dirtiest part of the vehicle. Workshops that specialize in this work put the full dealer path repair around $5,000 by the time it's finished, and that's their figure, not a manufacturer's. So weigh it accordingly. And this isn't theoretical. Roughly 264,000 HiLux, Fortuner and Prado models built between October 2015 and April 2020 were found by the federal court to have a defective filter system and not to be of acceptable quality, with the court also finding the marketing of them was misleading. Estimates of the total bill have swung between about $1 billion and more than $2 billion. I'll use the lower end because the court cut the assessed loss in value from 17.5% down to 10%, and the conservative figure is the one you can defend. What I've never seen properly explained is why that system was calibrated the way it was for this market in the first place. My read, and it is a read, is that a duty cycle, which looks perfectly reasonable in a laboratory, simply does not resemble the life an Australian ute actually leads, and nobody with the authority to stop the program wanted to be the person who said so. But that's me reasoning to the most likely cause, not reporting a finding. Your old ute cannot ever hand you that bill. There's no filter to block, no fluid to run out of, no module to fail. That is not sentiment. That's a permanent structural cost advantage, and the market has priced it. Now the honest part, because if I only give you the upside, I'm selling you something. Not every old ute is going up. A tired V6 automatic with 300,000 kilometers, a bald tray, a sagging headliner, and no books is a tired old ute, and it will be sold as one. What's climbing is a narrow band. The V8s, the Turbo 6s, the manuals, the honest ones with paperwork, and the working diesels that predate the emissions gear. Everything else is just transport, and transport gets priced like transport. Rust is the killer, and it hides where you don't look. Tray floors under the mat, the seam where the cab meets the tub, around the fuel filler, under the rubber where water sits for 6 years. A ute that lived on a farm near the coast can look fine standing up and be finished underneath. Safety is the genuine, unarguable weakness. An old ute has none of the modern electronic assistance and a crash structure designed to a standard that has moved on considerably. If it's the family's only vehicle and there are kids in it, that deserves real weight in your thinking. And anyone who tells you otherwise is enjoying the argument more than they care about your family. Then there are the model-specific traps. Barras have a known weak point in the oil pump drive gears, and anyone building one for power addresses that first. The last of the VF V8s, the 2015 to 2017 build, have a reputation for fuel injector failures, rough running, warning light, limp mode, and parts availability has a horizon. When the brand was retired in 2020, the commitment was after-sales support and spare parts for at least 10 years, which takes you to about 2030. The specialty arm has since said it intends to keep going beyond that. Body panels and trim are already the hard part, not mechanical bits. Fuel is the other one. A V8 ute doing city work will drink, and there's no clever way around a big petrol engine in traffic. So what do you actually do about it? If you're still with me, and thanks, we're through the heavy part, this next bit is the practical section, and it's the bit worth writing down. First, find the paperwork. Every service record, every receipt, the original books, the second key. Documented history is worth thousands on a good one, and I mean that literally, not as a figure of speech. A shoebox of stamped receipts is the difference between a private sale and a wholesale offer. Second, get the insurance right. If it's worth more than the insurer's guide thinks it's worth, market value cover will pay you what the guide says, not what it costs to replace. Agreed value costs a bit more, and it's the whole ballgame on an appreciating vehicle. Take photos, get a written valuation if you can. Third, and this one hurts a few people, modifications reduce value on the collectible ones. Lowered suspension, aftermarket exhaust, a tune. Every one of those narrows the pool of serious buyers and complicates an agreed value policy. If you've still got the standard parts in the shed, keep them. And if yours is a manual, understand that the manual is the premium. The third pedal is doing real work on the price. Fourth, chase the rust before it chases you. Pull the tray mat this weekend. Look at the seams. Drill nothing, poke gently, and if you find bubbling, deal with it now while it's a panel job rather than later when it's a rebuild. Fifth, drive it. Seals dry out, brakes seize, tanks grow things, fuel goes stale. A ute that gets used gently stays worth more than one that sits for 4 years under a cover in a damp shed. The Garage Queen with 50 kilometres a year is not being preserved. It's quietly deteriorating in a tidier way. A bit of history worth knowing because it explains why this body style matters here and nowhere else. The story goes that in 1933, a letter arrived at Ford Australia. A farmer's wife wanting something she and her husband could take to church on Sunday and take pigs to market in on Monday. A young designer named Lou Bant drew the answer, and in 1934, the coupe utility existed. Not a truck with a cab stuck on a ladder frame. A car with a tray, one welded structure, riding like a car because it essentially was one. That idea is Australian in origin, and it stayed alive here for 82 years after everyone else abandoned it. And the top end of that market has gone somewhere ridiculous. 4 supercharged flagship utes were built in secret at the very end for a handful of executives, running the LS9 V8 with 474 kilowatts and 815 newton meters through a 6-speed manual. One of them changed hands for $1.2 million. That is a ute with a tray that a plumber's grandson could theoretically have loaded with copper offcuts. You don't care about that ute, and neither do I. But the top of a market pulls on everything below it, which is why a plain V8 tradesman's ute with 120,000 kilometers now gets asked about by people who aren't tradesmen. It's not only happening here either. In the United States, small 1980s Toyota pickups went from being invisible used trucks to genuine collectibles. The number added to specialist insurance policies quadrupled between 2017 and the early 2020s, and the share of owners under 40 more than doubled. Average sale prices sit in the high teens in US dollars, with clean examples going far past that, and there's a pristine 1991 sitting in Michigan with a $69,900 ask on it. Same disease, different continent, simple, fixable, unkillable, small trucks are being bid up by people who've priced a new one. Now, the number. Every dual cab in the country is sold on 2 figures, and you already know both of them. 3.5 tons of braked towing, around a ton of payload. They're printed on the same page, in the same brochure, sometimes in the same sentence. Here's what nobody at that desk will do with you. The subtraction, take the popular V6 dual cab, Brake towing, 3,500 kilograms. Gross vehicle mass, the most the ute alone is allowed to weigh. Loaded, 3,350. So far, so good. Now find the third number, the one that isn't on the poster, gross combination mass. 6,400 kilograms. That's the ceiling for the ute and the trailer together, and it is the number that actually governs your life. Add the first two together. 3,350 plus 3,500 is 6,850. You're 450 kilograms over the combined limit before you've put a single tool in the tray. The two headline figures cannot coexist. Not shouldn't, cannot. So work out what's left for you. Hook up a genuine 3.5-ton van, and the ute, everything, curb weight plus every single thing you add, has to live inside 2,900 kilos. A high-spec one weighs around 2,388 empty. That leaves you something in the region of 500 kilograms. Now start loading. 2 adults, a canopy, drawers, a fridge, a dual battery setup, a spare, water, recovery gear, a load of firewood at the destination. You're illegal somewhere around the second passenger and the canopy, and you'll never know, because there's no light on the dash for it. And here's the part that should genuinely make you cold. The accessories that ate your margin were sold to you at the same desk on the same day by the same person who quoted you the 3.5 tons. The bull bar, the tray, the canopy, the drawers. Every one of them was a line item on the same invoice as the towing figure, and not one of them came with the subtraction attached. Nobody lied to you. Each number, on its own, is true and lawfully derived. That's what makes it work. They told you what it can tow, and they told you what it can carry, and they let you assume, as any reasonable human would, that you could do both at once. If you're ever in a serious incident with a van behind you and an assessor gets out a portable scale, that assumption becomes your problem. Your insurance's escape hatch and your legal exposure, not theirs. Now go and look up the old single cab tray back everybody calls agricultural. Gross vehicle mass of 3,510 kilograms. Payload around 1,300 kilograms and 130 litres of fuel. It carries more, honestly, with no clever wording. That's not nostalgia talking. That's the spec sheet, and it's a large part of why the old ones are worth what they're worth. Step back from the money for a second, because there's something underneath all of this that I think is worth more than the resale figure. A machine you understand changes your relationship with the world slightly, not in a grand way. In a small, daily, practical way, you hear a noise and you have a theory instead of a knot in your stomach. You put a spanner on something and it moves. You fix a thing on a Sunday morning for $11 and a coffee, and Monday arrives without a phone call to anyone. That's not about being clever, and it's certainly not about being able to build an engine. It's about the difference between owning something and merely holding the keys to it. The old ute in your driveway was built by people who assumed you'd be the one keeping it alive. That's why the fasteners are where your hand can reach them. Why the diagnosis is a screwdriver and an ear. Why the thing that fails is the thing you can replace. That assumption is the actual inheritance. The steel is just what it's written on. So here's your list. 1. Work out what you've actually got. Engine, gearbox, spec, and whether it's original. V8 or Turbo 6, manual, unmodified, with books. That's the top of the market. Base model, automatic, no history. That's transport. 2. Judge it on rust, not paint. Tray floor, cab to tub seam, fuel filler sills. Half an hour with a torch this weekend, free. 3. Fix your insurance. Agreed value, written valuation, photographs on file. 1 phone call, maybe a small premium increase, and it's the single highest return thing on this list. 4. Gather the paperwork into one place. Books, receipts, both keys, the original parts you took off. Costs nothing, worth thousands. 5. Stop modifying it. If it's already modified and you have the standard bits, keep them somewhere dry and labeled. 6. Use it, service it properly, and don't let it sit for years at a time. Total spend: a torch, an afternoon, and 1 insurance call. That's the whole program. And here's what you get out of it in the plainest possible terms. There's a repair bill coming for a huge number of vehicles on the road right now. A blocked filter, a failed urea injector, a module that won't talk to the scan tool, 4 figures minimum, and sometimes 5. That bill is going to land on driveways all over the country over the next 5 years. It is never going to land on yours, Not once. That's not luck. That's a property of the machine you already own, and every year that goes by, more people work out what that property is worth. Now I want something from you, and I'd like it specific. Put your ute in the comments properly. Model, year, engine, kilometers, manual or auto, and the last number anyone actually offered you for it. Not what you reckon it's worth. What someone was willing to hand over. I'll go through them and tell you honestly which ones are underpriced, which ones are dreaming, and what I'd check first on yours. That's a fair trade for 800 words of my opinion. And to the people who are about to tell me old utes are rubbish, unsafe, thirsty, and that the market's a bubble, come on in, the argument's better with you in it. Bring numbers. If you've got a mate who paid too much and lost his shirt, that's a genuinely useful story for the next person reading, so tell it. If this was worth your time, subscribe. There's a thread in here I deliberately left alone. What happens to all these things when the last of the factory body panels dries up, and who's quietly gearing up to make them instead? I'm still working out how big that business actually is, and when I've got it straight, that's the one I want to make next. Go pull the mat out of your tray, take a torch, and be a bit nicer to that old thing than you were yesterday, because it's been carrying you for years and it's about to start paying you back.